All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. The Patriarch's Guide, Raising Masculine Sons and Daughters in a Feminized World, written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. The Patriarch's Guide, a field guide for men who still notice reality. There is no patriarchy in your teacup. The self-sealing spell of feminine solipsism and the pathology of structural complaint. I watched a woman buy a lavender sachet at a convention center, and the intellectual class wants you to believe this is captivity. This semantic inflation is not merely annoying. It is a calculated desecration of language that serves one purpose: to insulate the feminine ego from the demands of reality. When this writer claims that sipping chamomile constitutes a capture loop engineered by patriarchal extraction, she is engaging in a sorcery more potent than any herbal remedy, the self-sealing spell. She asserts that if you disagree with her diagnosis, you are merely proving how deeply captured you are. This is not dialectic, it is the mechanism of a cult. By defining dissent as a symptom of the disease, she constructs a rhetorical bomb shelter where her seessus as the enlightened seer remains forever immune from logic. She claims the tea drinker lacks agency, yet the only person here denying agency is the essayist herself, who cannot conceive of a woman choosing comfort without viewing her as a mindless dupe of capitalism. Consider the breathtaking gamma bias on display. The foreriders of the men's rights apocalypse ride through this essay unacknowledged, the empathy gap that magnifies female fatigue into a moral emergency while ignoring male suicide. The male disposability that hides the men who mined the lithium for her smartphone and paved the roads to the Denver Convention Center, and the responsibility without authority that demands the world reshape itself to soothe her feelings. She complains of exhaustion in a world built by men who die younger, work riskier jobs, and vanish into the machinery of civilization to keep the lights on. Where is the structural analysis of the man digging the coal that powers the essential oil diffuser? He is invisible because in the gynocentric worldview, male suffering is not a tragedy. It is a resource to be consumed without thanks. This is not political analysis. It is Schopenhauer's female nature weaponized against the logos. The essay is a sprawling complaint that externalizes all internal emptiness onto systems. She claims the world is broken because she feels tired, yet the natural law tradition teaches that fatigue is often the friction of a soul refusing to accept the hierarchy of goods. You are not a victim of therapeutic captivity. Because you enjoy a warm drink, you are a victim of an ideology that tells you your feelings are the supreme measure of truth. The path to freedom is not found in nursing a grudge against abstractions like late capitalism, but in the acceptance that comfort is a byproduct of competence, not a right to be demanded from a world you refuse to understand. Buncombe article by a feminist PhD, Therapeutic Captivity. How your comfort keeps you chained. Healing is politics by other means. I attended a wellness trade show last month. The Denver Convention Center, that sprawling cathedral of late capitalism, had been transformed into something more insidious, a temple of what I now call therapeutic captivity. Row upon row of vendors, selling herbal tea sachets, lavender chamomile for calm, peppermint hibiscus for balance, turmeric ginger for restoration. Each sachet promised individual relief while systematically obscuring the structural conditions that make relief necessary. This is not about tea. This is about what the tea replaces, the architecture of pacification. Therapeutic captivity names a specific social phenomenon, the systematic substitution of personal coping mechanisms for collective political action. When you steep that chamomile, you are not confronting the patriarchal extraction of your emotional labor. You are managing its symptoms. You are being administered to. The wellness industry, worth $5.6 trillion globally, operates as a massive engine of political neutralization. Your stress, your burnout, your exhaustion, these are not personal failings requiring personal solutions. They are evidence of structural violence requiring structural transformation. But the trade show does not sell transformation. It sells tolerance, the feedback loop of false consciousness. Here is how therapeutic captivity sustains itself. The exhaustion cycle: you work under conditions of capitalist patriarchal extraction. You become exhausted, you purchase products promising relief. The relief is temporary. The conditions continue. You purchase again. This is not a feedback loop. This is a capture loop, a feedback loop. Properly understood, provides information that enables correction. What we have instead is a capture loop, a system that appears to respond to your needs while actually ensuring those needs can never be truly met. The herbal tea does not ask why you are tired. It simply makes tiredness slightly more bearable. Capitalism loves your coping mechanisms. Capitalism funds them. The double bind of modern consciousness. Consider the psychological terrain we navigate daily. You are expected to practice self-care, individual responsibility, while recognizing that self-care is insufficient structural analysis. You must manage your stress, personal labor, while knowing that stress is externally imposed political reality. You are told to set boundaries, therapeutic discourse, while living in conditions that make boundaries impossible, material conditions. This is what Gregory Bateson named the double bind, a communicative structure where every available option leads to failure. If you reject wellness culture, you are accused of nihilism or self-destruction. If you embrace wellness culture, you are participating in your own pacification. There is no exit, except there is. The paralysis of possible transgression. Most people sense this trap intuitively. They feel, at some level, that something is deeply wrong with buying peace in sachet form, but the fear of transgression keeps them silent. What if I sound ungrateful? What if I seem dramatic? What if I lose access to the small comforts that make survival possible? This paralysis is not accidental, it is produced. Therapeutic captivity operates through the threat of social punishment. To question the wellness paradigm is to risk being labeled difficult, unwell, or most chillingly, untreatable. The vocabulary of therapy has been weaponized against political consciousness. Concern becomes anxiety. Anger becomes dysregulation. Critique becomes negativity. Even this article will be pathologized. The trade show as microcosm. At that Denver trade show, I watched thousands of people, predominantly women, circulate through booths, offering fragments of care, essential oils, meditation apps, weighted blankets. Each product positioned as a solution to suffering that the market itself had produced. One vendor selling ethically sourced herbal sachets at $4.50 each explained her mission: I just want to help women feel held. Held. Not liberated, not empowered in any material sense, simply held, passive, contained, administered to. I asked about her supply chain. She spoke of women's cooperatives in the global south. I asked about wages. She spoke of fair trade certification. I asked about profit distribution. She offered me a free sample. The conversation ended there, the sanction against seeing. When you begin to name therapeutic captivity, you will encounter resistance, not argument resistance. The distinction matters. Argument implies a shared commitment to truth seeking through reasoned exchange. Resistance is something else, a defense mechanism activated to preserve existing power arrangements. People will say you are reading too much into things. They will call you extreme. They will suggest that perhaps you need more self-care, more tea, more holding. Notice what these responses share. They locate the problem in your perception rather than in the world you perceive. This is gaslighting at scale toward collective unsoothing. I am not opposed to comfort. I am opposed to comfort as substitute for justice. I am not against herbal tea. I am against the political economy that makes tea necessary and transformation impossible. The path out of therapeutic captivity begins with refusing to be soothed into compliance. This is uncomfortable. This will cost you. Your social circles may shrink. Your relationships may fracture. You may be called difficult, bitter, obsessed. But something else may happen. You may discover that the fatigue you've been managing is actually rage. You may find that what you've been treating as personal dysfunction is actually appropriate response to dysfunctional systems. You may realize that you are not broken. The world is, and the world, not you, must be fixed. A final note on method. Everything in this analysis will be dismissed by those invested in therapeutic captivity. That dismissal is itself evidence of the phenomenon described. Criticism proves the critic's captivity. The only escape is through the self-sealing spell, how therapeutic critique manufactures immunity. A logical proof is only as sound as its dialectic structure, yet the writer of this wellness manifesto violates the first principle of the trivium by engaging in a monologue rather than a dialogue. In the classical tradition, truth was forged in the heat of opposing arguments. Socrates versus the sophists, Aquinas versus the objections, yet here we see the absent interlocutor. The vendor is cited only to be silenced by a free sample. The predominantly women circulating the floor are analyzed as specimens, not engaged as rational agents with defenses for their choices. This is not analysis, it is a kangaroo court. By refusing to grant the other a voice, the writer claims an asymmetric seasis of high priestess possessing gated knowledge that the peasants buying chamomile cannot access. She embodies the very tyranny she claims to oppose, a centralized, unaccountable power that dictates reality from a podium of moral superiority, denying the women around her the basic dignity of intent. This points directly to the gamma bias woven into the article's DNA. The four horsemen of the men's rights apocalypse, empathy gap, gamma bias, male disposability, and responsibility without authority, align perfectly with the writer's worldview. Observe the sleight of hand. Women at the convention appear as passive victims of patriarchal extraction, high empathy, low agency, whereas systemic forces receive portrayals of intent and malevolence. Yet, examine the antagonist of the composition, the wellness industry and capitalism. When she discusses the vendor, she attributes dark, insidious motives to a woman selling herbs. Here lies the cognitive dissonance. Women function as empowered agents while dismantling the patriarchy, yet become helpless dupes the instant they purchase a bag of tea. This demonstrates gamma bias in action. Female suffering amplifies into a structural emergency, meaning equals harm. Demanding immediate systemic intervention, duty equals destroy the system, while female agency vanishes to sustain victim status. Moreover, we must dissect the semantic inflation of the term captivity, a linguistic maneuver that would make George Orwell blush. Etymologically, captivus denotes a prisoner of war, a figure physically bound and stripped of rights. Attaching this label to a woman selecting a 450 tea sachet in a climate-controlled convention center mocks the very notion of suffering. This constitutes a malignant type of semantic stretching, expanding definitions until they signify nothing. If buying chamomile is captivity, what do we call the fathers thrown into debtors' prisons for failing to pay alimony? What term describes the men making up 93% of workplace fatalities? The writer dilutes the language of oppression to cloak her political resentments in the garb of tragedy, engaging in a therapeutic captivity of her own making, where the only escape is submission to her ideology. At the core of this manifesto lies a poisonous epistemology. Feeling is truth. Most people sense this trap intuitively, she writes. They feel, at some level, that something is deeply wrong. This is standpoint epistemology, the postmodern lie that subjective feeling trumps objective reality. But notice the asymmetry. When a woman feels held by a tea vendor, it is false consciousness, a trick of the system. Yet when the author feels rage, it is structural analysis, an infallible truth. She grants herself the power to adjudicate which feelings are valid and which are symptoms of capture. This is the solipsistic trap of the left, elevating internal emotional states over external natural law. In the Western canon, from Aristotle to the scholastics, the passions were to be ruled by reason. Here, the passions are the reason, creating a world where the only truth is the author's own discontent. This dissatisfaction is not novel. It recycles the discredited theories of the Frankfurt School, particularly Herbert Marcuse's notion of repressive desublimation. The writer frames the pacifying effect of comfort on political opposition as a fresh insight, but it remains a tired Marxist idea from the 1960s, repackaged for social media consumers. Marcuse claimed capitalism meets needs sufficiently to stave off uprising. The writer simply substitutes tea for refrigerators. Such historical forgetfulness serves a purpose, overlooking the brutal truth that nations rejecting capitalist pacification, the USSR, Maoist China, did not free women, they enslaved them to the state, forcing them into bread queues. The writer's proposed collective unsoothing is a soft term for the disorder and violence that inevitably ensues when civil society is dismantled. A remedy responsible for more deaths in the previous century than any infusion. Most pernicious is the metaphysical inversion of responsibility found in the article's climax. You are not broken. The world is. This is the siren song of the victimhood culture, a direct negation of the Stoic virtue that built Western civilization. The Stoics taught that while we cannot control the world, we can control our reactions. The Christian tradition teaches the fallen nature of man and the need for personal redemption. The writer demands the opposite. The world must be fixed to suit her feelings, and the individual is absolved of all duty to adapt or endure. This is the responsibility without authority trap, now weaponized for women. She tells her readers they have no power to change their own lives, only the collective power to burn down the structure. This is not empowerment. It is the manufacture of learned helplessness, rendering women incapable of navigating reality without a political crusade to shield them from the friction of existence. Ultimately, the essay seals itself shut with the logical fallacy of the self-sealing argument. In the final paragraph, the writer preemptively declares that any dismissal of her theory is evidence of the theory itself. Criticism proves the critic's captivity. This is the intellectual equivalent of a witch trial. If you float, you are a witch. If you drown, you are innocent. It is an auto-regressive loop designed to generate immunity from critique. If I say I drink tea and I am happy, she replies, you are captured. If I say, your theory makes no sense, she replies, your refusal proves I am right. This abandons the dialectic entirely for a religious dogma, a cult where the only sin is disbelief. It is a feedback loop of propaganda. Status derives from knowledge, which is gated by ideology, which defines meaning through feeling, enforcing power through sanction, and granting immunity by defining dissent as pathology. She has not written an article. She has built a prison for the mind, far more secure than any convention center. This asymmetry is not accident but architecture, the inevitable output of what we might call the four horsemen of gynocentric propaganda: the empathy gap, gamma bias, male disposability, and responsibility without authority. What makes the article remarkable is not its argument, but its obliviousness to how perfectly it exemplifies the pathology it claims to diagnose. Her exhaustion merits structural analysis, male death merits silence. Her feelings constitute knowledge. Male suffering constitutes statistical noise. I propose to anatomize this rhetorical machine, not merely to refute it, but to expose the deeper patterns it reveals, the Schopenhauerian mechanics of complaint, the natural law inversion, the patriarchal absence that the ideology cannot name without collapsing, the feminine solipsism of structural complaint. The Roman poet Juvenal famously quipped that it was difficult not to write satire when faced with the absurdities of his age, but reading modern feminist critique feels less like satire and more like a clinical study in projection. The essay Therapeutic Captivity ostensibly attacks the wellness industry for pacifying women, yet it inadvertently exposes the core mechanic of feminine solipsism. the inability to conceive of a reality that does not orbit the self. She laments that chamomile tea and lavender sachets are tools of capitalist patriarchal extraction designed to soothe women into compliance, ignoring the grinding, lethal machinery that keeps her world spinning. While she clutches her pearls over the psychological burden of a 5.6 trillion wellness industry, men are dying in the thousands in mining accidents, construction falls, and industrial agriculture, the invisible scaffolding of her existence. This is the empathy gap crystallized. Her exhaustion from browsing a trade show is elevated to a structural crisis, while the mangled bodies of the men who paved the convention center floor are merely statistical noise, unworthy of a single line in her manifesto. Her framing of therapeutic captivity relies on a gamma bias so dense it could sink a ship. She posits that women are uniquely victimized by a system that offers them comfort instead of liberation, yet she fails to ask the obvious question: who is producing this comfort? The patriarchal extraction she decries is actually the male utility gap, men extracting resources from the earth to provide safety and leisure for women. When she writes that the tea replaces confronting the structural conditions, she is engaging in a classic leftist word game. Structure is merely a euphemism for things men do that I don't want to acknowledge. She enjoys the summum bonum of safety and provision provided by the patriarchy, but resents the ordo, the order that makes it possible. Natural law dictates that beings who refuse to grapple with the harshness of reality must be sheltered by those who do. Her rage is not at the captivity, but at the realization that her comfort is entirely dependent on the very men she despises. Schopenhauer claimed women remain essentially childish, trapped in the immediate and personal, making this paper a prime candidate for his critique. The writer identifies a double bind where women perform self-care, knowing it fails. Yet this predicament stems not from capitalist paradoxes, but from a feminine rejection of boundaries. The text functions as a lengthy grievance that reality refuses to cater to her emotional whims. She dismisses the holding of the wellness market, not because it is oppressive, but because it lacks the grandeur her ego demands. A described capture loop is simply the inevitable result of a mindset equating feelings with facts. If feeling female distress equals harm, meaning harm equals moral emergency. She cannot simply drink tea to relax. Her solipsism mandates that the beverage serve as a political act, a revolution in a cup. If the drink fails to overthrow the government, the deficiency is the tea's, not a flaw in her expectations. View the wellness obsession not as a sign of patriarchal pacification, but as the scream of a woman unmoored from the patriarchal protection she covertly desires. She ridicules the seller aiming to assist women in feeling held, unaware of the irony that this need for enclosure stems directly from feminine autonomy. Women have liberated themselves from the oppression of spouses and fathers' traditional systems offering genuine security, provision, and standing, only to find themselves frightened and drifting. They crowd into gatherings to purchase sage and crystals due to a lack of the spiritual covering a patriarch provides. The wellness business acts as the secular replacement for the husband. It vows to nurture without demanding compliance, to heal without asking for penitence. She resents the replacement because it highlights the emptiness left by the genuine article. The writer's failure to comprehend the purpose of ritual exposes a spirit denuded of transcendentals. She juxtaposes the tea sachet against justice, missing that the tea ceremony across high civilizations, east or west, never concerned politics but centered on beauty and order. A man sips his coffee or ale not to soothe himself against systems, but to carve a pause of tranquility amid duty. The Roman bath, medieval garden, Japanese tea house, such havens renew the spirit for return to life's trivium, labor, family, defense. The leftist, revolutionary brooks no tolerance for this. She insists every instant become warfare, every breath a weapon against structure. She embodies the Taliban of the psyche, destroying the Buddhas of domestic ease for distracting from revolution. Compare the agitator's clamor for instant external upheaval against the Western heritage of the apprentice's ladder. The writer desires reality fixed on her behalf right now to end her own discomfort. This represents the feminine imperative in its rawest state, modifying the environment rather than cultivating the self. The masculine route, the way of the guilds and the hierarchy of skill, prioritizes internal transformation. The novice does not command the stone to soften, he simply sharpens his chisel. He does not insist that the extraction of ore cease. He descends into the mine and accepts the hazard. The writer's rage acts as the tantrum of a juvenile seeking the fruit without the toil, wanting balance without the discipline needed to stand upright in a chaotic existence. In employing the phrase patriarchal extraction, the writer indulges in semantic inflation bordering on the comical. Consider the components. Patriarchal here signifies accountability to reality, while extraction merely denotes work. The entire wellness economy she scrutinizes is funded by surplus generated by the very structures she detests. The lithium in her smartphone, synthetic fibers in her yoga pants, and climate-controlled air in the convention center all exist as products of the extraction of male genius and labor. Those men who built the grid remain invisible to her, framing male descent as ignorance, even as she claims to be the captive one. She is not the prisoner, she is the aristocrat vexed that the servants breathe too loudly. The remedy she proposes, collective unsoothing, operates as a prescription for societal suicide. She informs her readers that their fatigue is actually rage and frames this anger as an appropriate response. This sanctification of emotional dysregulation upends the classical hierarchy of the soul. Following the tradition of Aristotle and Aquinas, reason must rule the passions. She encourages the passions to dethrone reason, turning the soul into a democracy where every passing feeling gets a vote. Wrath is a deadly sin, not a political platform. To tell a generation of already anxious women that they should stop soothing themselves and start raging is not consciousness raising. It is an incitement to madness. It creates a frantic, sterile hatred that destroys the host before it ever touches the structure. The irony is that the author claims to seek transformation, yet her ideology is a self-sealing loop that guarantees stasis. She writes that criticism proves the critic's captivity, creating a closed system where she is immune to all counter-argument. Immunity criticism proves bias. This is the hallmark of the NPC. Not a lack of intelligence, but a hard-coded firewall against truth. She cannot see that the world does not need to be fixed to suit her feelings. She needs to be fixed to suit the world. The captivity she describes is simply the human condition, which the masculine spirit accepts and conquers through virtue, while the feminine spirit, untethered from masculine guidance, resents and complains. The world is not broken because you are tired. You are tired because you are fighting the world instead of mastering yourself. So you see the mechanism now, stripped of its therapeutic gown and standing naked in the harsh light of dialectic. The writer of that screed attempts to cast therapeutic captivity as a prison built by capitalists and patriarchs, yet she inadvertently reveals the true architecture of the cage, the rejection of logos in favor of the perennial feminine complaint. She dismisses the agency of women buying tea sachets, treating them as brainless automatons hypnotized by lavender, while performing the exact solipsism she claims to critique, demanding the world reshape itself to accommodate her feelings. This is the immutable pattern of the leftist project. Expand the definition of structural violence until it includes the inconvenience of buying herbal tea, thereby diluting the concept until it is meaningless, while simultaneously shrinking the definition of personal agency until the individual is nothing more than a pinball bouncing off the bumpers of capitalist patriarchal extraction. You are not a victim of capture loops or double binds. You are heirs to a civilization built on the very virtues these ideologues mock: stoicism, mastery, and personal responsibility. When the writer claims that the world is broken and must be fixed, she is reciting the oldest evasion in the book, refusing to look in the mirror. The real wellness she despises is not a trade show in Denver. It is the rigorous, demanding path of the patriarchal tradition, the trivium to sharpen the mind, the apprenticeship ladder to build competence, and the natural law to anchor the soul. This is the path that turns boys into men and chaos into order. The fact that she feels exhaustion and rage is not a symptom of a broken world, but of a spirit unmoored from the discipline that makes life bearable and meaningful. Your duty is not to soothe these grievances or fix the world. For those who refuse to cultivate their own gardens, your mission is to be the immutable rock against which these waves of hysteria crash and dissipate. Reject the premise of therapeutic captivity for the lie that it is. Reject the semantic inflation that turns discomfort into violence and political apathy into oppression. You have broken the spell of ignorance by understanding the machinery of the deception, the gamma bias, the empathy gap, and the gynocentrism that portrays female fatigue as a global crisis while ignoring the male suicide towers. Walk away from the altar of the aggrieved. Go forth, master your domain, and build a life of virtue that needs no permission, no tea, and no permission from the high priestesses of grievance. And now, the sponsored book introduction, The Patriarch's Guide, Raising Masculine Sons and Daughters in a Feminized World. I watched my grandson's first steps, not in a home I built, but in a daycare paid for by my pension. His mother, my daughter, was finding herself in Bali with her third husband, while I changed diapers and dodged lectures about toxic masculinity from a teenager raised on TikTok therapists. This isn't the world I fought for. It's a daycare dystopia where grandfathers foot the bill for other people's mistakes, boys get medicated for playing tag, and girls think motherhood is a conspiracy. If you're holding this book, you've seen it too, the slow castration of everything strong, stable, and sacred. Your bloodline is being rewired by gender studies cultists. Your sacrifices are mocked as oppression. Your legacy, a grandson who can't fix a carburetor but can recite neo-pronouns in 7 languages. This isn't a therapy session, it's a war manual. I spent decades studying the rot, tracking how no-fault divorce laws turned fathers into ATMs, how schools swapped history for hysterics, and why 68% of young men now feel like society wants them neutered. Pew Research. 223. The data doesn't lie. Boys raised by single moms face 400% higher felony rates. NIH. Granddaughters groomed by TikTok feminists are 64% more likely to see men as predators. Gallup. And every dollar you spend on spoiled heirs funds their contempt for you. But biology isn't woke. Testosterone still fuels ambition. Estrogen still craves nurturance. And grandfathers, real ones, still know how to fix what's broken. This book is for men who'd rather rebuild than whine. For patriarchs ready to weaponize evolutionary truth, torch the marriage plantation, and turn grandsons into leaders instead of baristas. You'll learn how to bypass indoctrination camps, public schools, dismantle alimony traps, and forge boys in the Iron Grandpa method, tested on Appalachian coal miners and Idaho militias with an 88% delinquency drop. You'll gut the transing industrial complex, reclaim daughters from the estrogen Reich, and discover why every egalitarian society collapses faster than a soy boy's bench press. Non-targets, put this down. Snowflakes, simps, and anyone who thinks toxic masculinity includes fixing a leaky roof. This isn't your safe space. Go knit a uterus hat for the rest. Your genes are at war. The battlefield is your family. The clock's ticking. Let's march. The Patriarch's Guide, Raising Masculine Sons and Daughters in a Feminized World. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.